Hello survivors and welcome to First Aid Spray, a Resident Evil podcast by fans for fans. This is episode 3 of the show, and in this edition we'll be focusing on the various different pieces of box art throughout the Biohazard series. Something a little bit light-hearted between our two Resident Evil 2 remake podcasts, perhaps. My name is Psyniac and you can just call me Psy. Joining me on the panel this week, returning to the show, the master of unlocking himself, Sherwin Matthews.
Alright.
Judging by a recent upload to the Fire Button YouTube channel, he's the master of unboxing, Steve Valance.
Hello.
And he's the master of something, but we haven't figured out what it is yet. Cerealbox64, Jordan Sagru.
Hey, guys.
So this episode of the podcast is being recorded live in the First Aid Spray Discord server, which you can join now to hear unedited versions of the podcast and contribute to the conversation in the text chat, as well as talk to us and other Resident Evil fans about the series. It's also a good place to put yourself forward for file readings and to appear in the show that way, and also ask questions for our Bitesize Discussion segment. It is a little bit quiet at the moment, it's early days, so if you're interested in contributing to a smaller community, then please do feel free. Thank you to everyone so far that's popped in. Special shout out to Colin for dropping in some of his great 3D recreations of RE3 backgrounds, some of which I tweeted out a few days ago, well, a couple of weeks ago now, I guess. You can find a link to the server in the description of this podcast and on all of our social media accounts. We're on Twitter at FASprayPod, Instagram as FASprayPod, and now on Facebook at facebook.com/FASprayPod. You can find the podcast on various different avenues, iTunes, Spotify and Stitcher. If you have any recommendations on other places to put the show, please do let us know. And if you can leave us a review on any of those formats, particularly iTunes, it would help us greatly. With all of that out of the way, let's move on to our first section, which of course is the news.
Okay, right. So our first bit of news then. Resident Evil 2 Safe House Experience and Bar will take place in London on the 25th and 26th of January.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what this means.
It's a very vague kind of thing, and it's very weird that they would decide to do it on launch day and the day after, and that's it. That's kind of a bummer.
Is it like a combination like bar, event, and escape room kind of deal, or?
My assumption is something like an escape room. I mean, I didn't read the press release if there is one, but I've read a couple of articles on it, and they kind of imply something like that. In particular, they said there's going to be like a couple of lucky teams of 4, but they didn't really say how many people. I know tickets are sold out for the event, like pre-release tickets. I think you are able to sort of rock up and hopefully get inside, but I'm sure there's sort of only a certain amount of people, obviously running over those 2 days as well. But yeah, lucky people will get to do the escape room bit, and then I think the bar is just kind of open to whoever.
Looking through
it's
the
a
link,
weird thing.
It's apparently part of this event will involve lucky teams of 4 taking part in a Resident Evil 2 Safe House Experience. This will task them with journeying through a recreation of the iconic Raccoon City Police Department in a bid to find safety. So that sounds like an escape room.
Yeah, or maybe not an escape room, because when I think escape room, I think, you're in a box and you got to get out. It reminds me more of like the London Dungeon thing where you walk through the corridors and people would sort of like oogie boogie out at you.
Is this like the Universal?
Yeah, a bit like
Japan?
that.
Yeah.
Something like that, maybe. I don't know. It's hard to say. I wonder if.
If it was that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's still pretty cool, and it's very specialist, which also makes it kind of cool, especially if you're lucky enough to go to the event. You'll have a unique experience, I suppose. And I know that one person on the board game Facebook group, I think it was, mentioned they were probably going, so we'll probably get a report from them after all's said and done to talk about, which will be cool.
Okay, our next bit of news then, if we don't mind moving on.
No, go for it.
The Resident Evil 2 demo, which, let's be fair, it's not really news, but yeah, the Resident Evil 2 demo's out. It's 30 minutes long, you get one shot, and that's your lot until the game releases on January 25th. And it's on PS4, Xbox One, Steam.
Yeah.
So what do we think on that one?
So I know that a couple of you guys haven't played it, and it's admirable because I actually put out a tweet on our official account saying that I wasn't going to, and then like the night beforehand I pretty much decided I was going to anyway. Partly helped by the fact that Capcom were running some kind of competition where if you post your finishing time, you can, and a hashtag on Twitter, you can enter with a chance of the collector's edition. And I want me those stupid keys, so I figured I'll play the demo.
That's pretty neat.
I'll play the demo for the stupid set of keys. Yeah, go on. But yeah, I know.
Could have won merchandise. I haven't played this yet. I could have won merchandise. Still going.
You could have had that Leon statue thing and the blueprint and whatever else. I don't know. I just remember there's keys. Yeah, but I know Steve and Jordan, you both haven't played it yet. Holding out for the full game, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose, and because it's only 30 minutes, you're not going to miss out on too much, but you get a good glimpse if you play it. But one thing that kind of confused me was when they called it a one-shot demo. I completely had a different idea of what one-shot was. I thought it was going to be a case of, and maybe it still is, so you'll have to confirm this for me, Si. I thought it was that you only get one bullet. It's like a demo, but you only get one bullet, and it's like for the aspect of, survival horror.
I like the idea. Cool. I mean, I like the idea.
I obviously am a little bit too literal, of course.
Yeah. I mean, one shot is what I mean by that is one go at the demo, but what that actually means is you can make another account and play it again, because I've done it twice. And I know lots of people have done it many more times than that. In fact, people have... this goes to show how popular the demo is alone and how much hype there is for this game in general. People have modded the demo already. So, yeah, someone's made a fixed camera version, which is a bit hokey. It's interesting, but it doesn't look quite right. Someone's made a first-person perspective one, which, I mean, obviously it does work because the RE engine was originally designed with that at least partially in mind, because RE7 first person perspective, so it kind of works aside from some texture issues and stuff. But yeah, I mean, people have gone crazy for it. Apparently it's been downloaded 1.5 million times, so that's pretty cool.
I feel like Nintendo are like feeling part vindicated with their their limited demos. You can only play them so many times, and then Capcom comes along and says you've got 30 minutes, that's it. And they're like, there we go.
Yeah, it does kind of remind me of like the global test fires and stuff like that they've done with Splatoon and stuff, in a way, in its own way.
And the demo expires, right? Like when the game launches, it's not available to play anymore?
It's
end of January.
Yeah. So about a week after the game comes out, it's going to go away, which is cool. Makes sense. Drives those play numbers for the 3 or so weeks that it is available, I guess. So that's pretty cool. In terms of the actual demo, I enjoyed it. I mean, there's not much to spoil from it, because, I mean, if you watch the E3 sort of playthrough footage that were doing around, and all the gaming publicists and stuff got their own sort of video on it, it's pretty much that, just wandering around the RPD as Leon, encountering your first, not your first zombie in terms of when you play the game, but encountering zombies in the RPD for the first time and wandering around the corridor and come back to Marvin. But yeah, 30 minutes gives you plenty of time to get equipped with the controls and get a feel for the game's engine and how it's going to look. And yeah, I was impressed. I'll put it that way. I actually died, which I was not expecting. Yeah, those zombies, man. If 2 of them get you at once, that's it. So,
but that's a treat, because I mean, everyone else wasn't posting that kind of footage up during the E3 time anyway. So you saw something technically new, horrible, but new. Yeah,
I was having fun just kind of experimenting. I spent some time in the library, and there's a few zombies in there, and I blasted them, and then I just kind of wandered around a bit, and they all started getting back up and crawling towards me again, and I thought I'd killed them, and they just seemed to keep doing it for a little while, which is kind of cool. So I had some cool experience out of it. I'm glad I kind of played it to a somewhat limited degree. I'm not going to touch it again. I could keep doing it and just like sink loads of time into that little section. I'm not going to do that. It's a nice, whet your appetite kind of thing. Sure, and you've played it somewhat. Do you have any reaction to it?
So I haven't actually played the demo. I've played a different version of the game, which was super cool. I got to wander around some areas of the RPD building, which I don't think you've seen if you've been playing the demo. It's cool. It's definitely got a similar sort of air to what you experience from Resident Evil, what you remember from Resident Evil 2, feels updated and so on. It's interesting. Have you guys met Lickers and stuff yet, or are they not in the demo?
I don't know if
they
are.
Trailers.
Yeah, I don't know if they are in the demo.
So it's weird. Lickers, there's more of them. from what I encountered. Slightly slower than what I remember though as well. So a little bit more manageable, if that makes sense.
Right.
But the one thing that really impressed me was it absolutely is a survival horror game in terms of your ammunition count. If you try exactly what you were saying, Si, if you try to kill everything, then you're going to die really horribly because you are going to run out of ammunition. I've also been chased by a certain tyrant as well, and that's pretty scary. That's pretty scary stuff.
Yeah, that's. I mean, everyone seems to be very well on board with that whole aspect of it, and very pleased with how that's come out. But yeah, the zombie thing's interesting because I assumed few shots they go down, and I was just kind of like, well, all right, run past them. I figured they were dead, but they do eventually get up. They don't get up right away. They'll sit there, which is good because obviously the whole map is now completely interconnected. There's no doorway sequences, and you will be doing backtracking and all kinds of classic Resident Evil stuff. So those corpses are going to be getting back up eventually, and they'll still be there. So in that classic Resident Evil way, you will again have that aspect of, do I clear this room? Or do I leave this guy here and kind of try to juke him around him? I had no problems having loads of ammunition, but yeah, I was not like spending forever just blasting every single zombie. It was just that one experience where I was just messing around at the end. But yeah, overall, very impressed. I mean, we did say hopefully this is a marriage of old and new. And yeah, it seems they've for the most part, they've achieved that from what we've experienced so far. Did you this version of the game you played, was this to do with the meet and greet, the developer meet and greet this past weekend?
Yeah, I was privileged enough to be asked by Capcom to come to that and demo the board game. Which those of you who don't know me, I'm lead developer for Resident Evil 2, the board game. So we got to go there and hang out with a bunch of people, play the game with people, which was nice, which was cool. We met some really awesome people. Some people who didn't know the game existed, and some people who obviously had already been backers and loved the thing, which is good. But yeah, it was just super nice to catch up with the Capcom guys and obviously get my hands to actually play some of the game, which was really nice because obviously they had banks of the actual consoles with the game playing on there, and that was a very much a different version or a different experience than what you have on the demo, which is sort of later on and so on. So it's pretty cool. I won't talk too much about it because obviously I'm slightly fearful of sort of spoiler-tastic things, but yeah, it was that was a great event actually. Like the developers were super engaging. They knew exactly, obviously, unsurprisingly, they know what they're talking about, but also they definitely seem to have taken on board a lot of stuff with regards to how they want their game to feel in relation to the old game, which is really reassuring. So,
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I saw some pictures and I was, slightly jealous, and also in a stupid way, scanning through some of the pictures and there's Sherwin. I was like, it's a little bit of pride there. That's our boy out there repping it. So yeah, it was cool. It's and like you say, the developers were there and other people from the community. I saw posts going up by certain members of the community that had been invited along. It was cool for them to hold an event like that. It does seem like they are paying attention to the community a little bit in that fashion. So yeah. Unless anyone has any other demo talk, obviously go for it. I
kind of have one thing. It's only slightly, just a slight more I hate social media kind of thing, because I wasn't going to play the demo, still haven't played the demo, but I've already seen the big new part of the demo. If it literally is just the old E3 demo, I've seen the trailer. Someone literally the day of it out, like, Steve, you need to see this, and like before I have a chance to look away, I'm seeing everything. No, God.
Yeah, I had to say, I do like the fact there is a trailer on the end, like a new trailer, and I quite like the trailer for what it's worth. It kind of shows a lot of stuff, but in like really quick glances. So as long as you're not like pausing it to really study it, it's kind of like a tour de force of whoa, what's happening, without giving too much away. But it was inevitable that it was going to be everywhere, and it's kind of annoys me that. And I think I sort of brought this up before, Capcom acknowledged so much as well. I mean, today they put up like 4 different posts about Fourth Survivor, like showing off pictures of hunger and stuff. I was like, that's a bit needless. You don't need to just... and like they're doing loads of stuff with tofu posts, and it's like, can we have just waited? Can we just wait till the game was out? We're nearly there.
I just have to hope there's still some like tricks in the bag they haven't actually let out first, to be honest. That's what I'm hoping for now.
Yeah.
But I've said my bit.
No, you're totally right though. You're right to bring that up, and yeah, I mean, but like you say, we're I'm sure there's more to it, and we're so close now that we don't have too much time left to have fingers in ears and eyes shut. Sort of, yeah, it's very nearly here. This will be the last time we talk about it until the game is out. So, Cool, right. Well, that being said, let's move on to the main discussion of this week's episode, which is all about box art. And now, reading the file Secretary's Diary A from Resident Evil 2 1998, DQJ, who you can follow on Twitter at Q_J_6.
April 6th. I accidentally moved one of the stone statues on the second floor when I leaned against it. When the chief found out about it, he was furious. I swear the guy nearly bit my head off, screaming at me never to touch the statue again. If it's so important, then maybe he shouldn't have put it out in the open like that. April 7th. I heard that all the art pieces from the chief's collection of rare items, literally worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't know which is the bigger mystery, where he finds those tacky things, or where he's getting the money to pay for them. May 10th. I wasn't surprised to see the chief come in today with yet another large picture frame in his hands. This time it was a really disturbing painting, depicting a nude person being hanged. I was appalled by the expression on the chief's face as he leered at that painting. Why anyone would consider something like that to be a work of art is beyond my comprehension.
So, as important as the games are as, games, when you come across them for the first time, often, especially way back in the day, as you like to say, seeing on a shelf, box art is important to video games. They've got to be eye-catching, they've got to draw you in, they've got to tell you what you're picking up, hopefully. And this was an idea that was passed along to me by Jordan really early when we were talking about ideas for the show. And I picked up on it. It just as like, it's going to be like a really fun, sort of casual affair. So we're going to go through and dissect that initial vision, when you see the game for the first time, on a shelf or whatever, what you see, your first potential impression, provided you haven't seen a magazine or a YouTube video in today's day and already gotten a feel for the game, what you would see in a rental store when you saw Resident Evil, and talk about first impressions and box art, good box art, bad box art, does it represent the game, and that kind of stuff. There is an IMGA link, should be available in the podcast description. If you click that, it will take you to what we're talking about, everything in the right order. Letting you know what's what. There's about 90 something images to go through, so it's going to be a bit of an interesting one. It's pretty much everything, but yeah, the IMGA link should be in the podcast description, but if it's not there, depending on what app or device you're using, I guess the best way to go is to soundcloud.com /first-aid-spray-podcast. Find the episode and it should link you from there pretty easily. So let's start at the beginning. Let's start at Resident Evil 1, Biohazard. Its Japanese box art differs from those in NTSC and PAL regions. We have what is now kind of a synonymous feature of Resident Evil in general, but also box arts, the eye with the dripping blood, whereas PAL and NTSC regions got the very strange image. I'm not really sure how to describe what that original box art is. It's always seemed very weird to me.
Is that meant to be Chris or is it meant to be Richard? I always get that a lot.
It's Richard, apparently. And most people believe it's Chris, and I can completely understand why, but I have a reliable source that said it's Richard as per a Marvel comic book, apparently, that was made to tie in with the game. It does look more like Chris, and even then it doesn't really look like Chris. But yeah, it's Chris with his gun that's not in the game, and like some sort of weird like JPEGs of spiders and all kinds of nonsense just all over the place. It's a bit of a weird one.
It looks like he's got a Rorschach being projected on the back of him.
Yeah, a little bit.
Do you know, but I quite like this. It's got that sort of classic feel of... I like the fact that this, and also I think one of the others, I think Resident Evil 2, we'll get to that in a minute, but it has that sort of feel where it feels very... this is all concept art. This is all stuff which was
Yeah.
made, and then they made the game afterwards. So there's this nice sort of raw, almost B-movie kind of feel to this thing that I actually quite like. That said, the Japanese art is so much better.
Yeah, I would
It's just so
agree
much
with
more
that.
classic.
It doesn't misrepresent the game in that B-movie way. You can see the tie between that and, say, sort of the cutscenes. And yeah, this got some stuff on it that sort of tells you what you're looking at with the monsteriness and the sort of, I don't know if you would call that a panicked expression, but some kind of, there's something
It is a
going
mixture
on
of
there.
expressions going on.
Well, I mean, either side of his face looks completely different. So
Yeah.
A thousand years ago, when I was young and I played Doom for the first time and I picked up the Berserk pack, that's kind of what I expect the Doom guy's face turned into. Like that kind of fevered, I would have killed the world kind of thing.
Speaking of Doom, when I was a kid and I saw this cover in shops and stuff, that was kind of the vibe that I got from it. Looking at it, was I was thinking of the Doom cover because it's so chaotic. He's basically standing at the point of a corner of a room, and he is surrounded by, there's some kind of tarantulas on there. There's all kinds of shadows, and obviously he looks a bit peeved. Let's just put it that way. And I don't know, it looked chaotic enough that I seemed to think that it was kind of related to Doom. I thought, man, this is going to be just a crazy game where you're just a barrage of enemies. So that was always the vibe that I got. I personally prefer this one over the Japanese one. Japanese one I could probably walk past and okay, I can see it's an eye, but I look at the PAL version and I'm like, what is going on there? There's just so many things to look at. It's just chaotic. That's how I would sum it up.
Yeah, I can totally see your point. I think with me and the Japanese version, I tend to like stuff that is a bit more simple and basic and sort of striking in its simplicity, if you like. But the chaotic nature of it definitely works, and it's stood the test of time in its own strange way. It's synonymous. It's iconic.
To interject, right? Oh, sorry.
Sure.
Go on, Steve. The Japanese case, right? I love the fact that this is obviously the origin of survival horror when you break it down. It's even got it on the case as a big sales pitch. But then you look at the back, and you got this beautiful skyscape and a single crow trying to imply they are a lot more significant than they actually are in the game. Because they're you see them twice.
It's an extremely vocal crow, by the way. It's
I'm in the game! I'm the main character! But then you got the English version, it's you're dead scared, face your fear, and terrible puns aside. But I'm half and half. I prefer the front cover of the Japanese version and the back cover of the NTSC version.
Yeah, that's completely fair. And it's worth noting that on this little gallery here, I did cut out ones that were essentially identical. But in the instance of the PAL and the NTSC, it is worth noting there's a running theme for Resident Evil 1, where the PAL version seems to be just slightly zoomed more in. You'll see what I mean with other ones. So the next couple of the Sega Saturn ones, these are pretty simple in a way.
Before we go any further, I do have to mention that, of course, the PAL cover of the Resident Evil 1 is also synonymous with the mirrored box art challenge a few years ago. Which I'm going to show you this because it's a beauty. It's a beauty. So this is going into the main chat now.
Oh wow! So yeah, this is exclusive for the. That's incredible.
Live viewers.
I mean, if you thought his face was a little bit weird in the original, this is fantastic.
Made by Capcom.
Capcom. That's so weird. It looks like he's picked that weapon up and he's just not sure what to do with it. Is it a boomerang?
Points for anybody who can even try to pronounce the new mirrored version of the name Resident Evil.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's. I'm going to say that's the benefit of listening live. Let's put it that way. Or you can do it Google. You'll probably find it. But yeah, so getting back to the actual
swiftly moving on. now let's talk about how glorious the Sega Saturn cover is for the thing. That's amazing. The
Biohazard Sega Saturn cover is, I guess, a bit of bloody chain link. I'm not really sure.
Do you know, it feels more like a Silent Hill game.
I have no idea. It just kind of looks like a stock photo that they touched up or something. Personally,
Yeah.
You know what
very
this
odd
is?
choice.
This is obviously a reference many years before the reference would make sense to Ico's tease many years later when they were teasing what was going to follow Shadow of the Colossus, and it was just a chain.
I haven't
Do you
thought about
everybody,
that.
everybody remember that?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that in so long. It took me a second for my brain to.
They're like, we're making a new Team Ico game. Here's the first image. What is it? It's a chain. Wow, that's what it looks like. I don't know what they were going for with that.
It's really weird.
I feel like making a point with regards, because we've seen two Japanese covers, and they're both really kind of
Simple.
sort of subdued and simple.
Yeah.
And I'm not fully aware of what sort of like content discretion is like in Japan as far as like box arts. So I don't know if they have any kind of censorship with regards to just how provocative covers can be, at least during the 90s. So I wasn't sure if maybe something to do with that, because even on the Biohazard cover for the PS1, even on the back, obviously it's quite subdued. Like there aren't that many pictures of violence. There's not really much of a hint of blood. So I don't know if they went with a completely different approach compared to in Europe and in North America.
No, that's a good point, especially when you compare it to the US version of the Saturn cover, which has the grotesque concept art, again, of the zombie looking over his shoulder, the classic piece of concept art. It's a stark contrast in its own way. Yeah, okay, it's chain link with blood on it, but by comparison, and also, in all fairness, between the two of them, I know which one speaks most about the game. In fact, I would say that NTSC Saturn cover is one of the best ones for the original game in terms of kind of telling you exactly what it is. It's about monsters.
Do we have any of the PC covers for the PC release in this? It looks like it's just the consoles.
It's just the consoles. I did look at the PC ones, and I think they're pretty much the same, but I could be wrong.
I think the PC one is literally the same as the Saturn cover, from what my memory serves.
Right,
I was going to say, which is black silhouetted, that concept art, the concept art of the zombie, turning around. So
again, like I say, if I have left stuff out if it was too similar to something else. So, for example, here the Saturn version in Europe was just the PlayStation cover again. So there's not much to say there. So moving on to go for it.
Well, I was going to say, swiftly moving on, because pretty much the rest of them seem to be sort of variations on a point.
Yeah.
But let us quickly scroll down now to Deadly Silence. Because that crow is back.
And it's a Japanese cover again.
Yeah.
They just
Japan,
love that crow.
Biohazard is about the crow.
What's a zombie inside?
It looks so stoic, though. Its face just says, "I am going to triumph."
Yeah,
do not bring me down.
This
Anybody
is the
play the Japanese version of the game? Like, is the crow a bigger character in the Japanese versions?
Yeah, it's they actually in the original Resident Evil, there's no Wesker. It's just a giant crow.
Yeah,
he's the lead antagonist.
At the end of it, the helicopter takes off. There's a crow. Oh, sorry, spoilers if no one's played it. There's a crow flying alongside the helicopter that gets its own cutscene.
He gives a little wink to the camera and then
to
credits.
High fives Barry. Yeah, exactly.
In terms of the ones that we did skip past, this is what I was saying about the PAL version. Again, with director's cut, you've got the simplified. It's so cheap where they just cut the picture of Richard, not Chris, out for both the US and the PAL one. But for some reason, the PAL one's slightly different and more zoomed in.
He's just getting closer and closer.
He's just edging closer and closer.
Before long, you won't even see his ears. It'll just be that face.
Be the eyes, yeah. But
those eyebrows just don't work, do they?
Well, I mean, no. It looks like one person drew one side of the face and one person drew the other. It's nonsense.
This is a broken record point to make
is,
now.
Yeah.
But the director's cut Biohazard cover, it's just of the whole of the mansion, which is a really nice picture, but again subdued. So like they were obviously going with something very different in Japan when they were marketing the first game. They weren't making it so much about all of the zombies, but more just the suggestion of horror.
Yeah, it does seem to be that way, and I quite like this cover in a way. It doesn't necessarily tell you too much about the game, but I guess it strikes. Well, maybe it doesn't even imply it's a horror game. It's hard to say. I just like the mansion being the focal point of it as it is in the game, and especially I guess it being a re-release, you can kind of do that because people might already know. Hey, it's that mansion that you ran around, re-release now with DualShock controls and blah 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 blah.
What I would say is it's very subdued. That particular cover, like the whole thing feels really faded.
The colours are a bit. Yeah,
like you go into that shop and you kind of buy that because you're looking for that, not because you're just looking through stuff and you see that title on the screen. Oh, that looks kind of fun. I'll buy that. Which is, I think, it is more of a statement of where Resident Evil was at the time, perhaps. At that point, Resident Evil was exploded. It's big. They don't have to worry so much about pulling people in with the cover.
No, yeah, that's totally fair. And conversely, like the zombie looking over his shoulder again, that's the one that you look at and that catches your eye. That looks like that could be a fun video game. So it is really weird how different the takes on those were.
Although the placement of the graphic makes it look like the zombie's looking at the now supports the DualShock analog controller sign.
Yeah,
he's like, what?
That's because he bought the one with the 2 sticks but without the rumble, and now he realises he's got to buy another controller.
Man.
Actually, it's more like it's just this look of hopelessness. He's heard the soundtrack.
But
no, they mention the new soundtrack, do they? Well, I can't read Japanese, so I'm gonna have to take it on a limb there.
This is true. Yeah, that's might be what it says there in that big red triangle. Features terrible soundtrack.
No, the Japanese cover is it just features crow soundtracks. That's it. Yeah.
So moving to Deadly Silence again. These ones are interesting to me, in particular the NTSC and PAL version, with the focus being on the Tyrant. I mean, I don't know if you consider that spoilers. The game had been out 10 plus years at this point. But it seems interesting that they focused on that character, or creature rather, on that release. The American one is really rather busy. The PAL version seems a bit more focused.
It's interesting. Until I'd seen the zombie on the PAL director's cut, I would have assumed that the reason we don't have a lot of stuff with gore on it is on the PAL versions is something to do with putting these games out to places. I mean, one of the interesting things about where the DS was marketed in Nintendo is they aren't exactly the company that wants to have lots of gore in their games.
Yeah.
So that may be why we lost all that stuff. And got a friendly time instead.
That's true. We will be talking more about Deadly Silence in the future, which is quite exciting. So,
can we just take a minute to appreciate there is actually a hunter on a cover for once? That's nice. And dual wielding Jill, even if it's over the top.
Yeah, it's kind of nonsense, but also, when I saw that, I was like, it's kind of cool that Jill is on the front cover when not Chris was on the front cover of the other one. I guess maybe people just have assumed it's Chris so much now that it might as well just be. But there you go.
The Deadly Silence covers. I mean, the Japanese one. I quite like it because the subtlety kind of works for it. You've got some kind of some shadowed images of zombies in the actual. So it's almost like a double exposure on the crow. So you can see some zombies there. I actually prefer the NTSC cover because even though it is frantic, there's just a lot of stuff going on. You've got the Tyrant, and his claws are coming down. It kind of makes these bars like it's kind of caging the rest of the scene. Jill's surrounded by zombies, a hunter, and obviously she's dual wielding, which is like bombastic, but it looks pretty cool. I'm not so keen on the PAL version because it's just the Tyrant. He's kind of shrugging. He's just like, "What do you want from me?"
Totally fair. Totally fair.
I mean, that said it all, really, didn't it?
Yeah. No. Moving on. So, Biohazard 2, the Japan and PAL version is the same. This is a piece of artwork that pretty much never comes up again. To me, this is really nostalgic because it's the game that I fell in love with. It's the first game I played from the series. So when I see it, it's always kind of cool to be like, that's that. But it doesn't really do much in terms of what we were saying about selling you on the game. It's more of that sort of Japanese minimalism. It's really very strange. I always kind of thought of it as looking a bit more skull-like, like skeleton-like, more than zombie. But maybe that's just sort of the monochrome look.
It's only in the last few years. Go on, sorry.
I was going to say, I'm assuming you chaps have seen the old George A. Romero trailers, right?
Yeah.
That face, maybe it's just my memory misremembering, but it's very, very familiar to one of the shots. Like, it's only like a brief shot when zombies are hammering through, but there's one where a zombie's just staring dead at the camera. And it looks like they've just moved it to the side. Maybe that's kind of playing with me, but I just had to look at that again. That definitely is ringing bells outside of nostalgia, and I think it's the cover of the retro pack for the board game.
I think for me, this is one of the most scary Resident Evil images I think there actually exists. This itself is just horror. This is horrifying. Like, you look at the others, you kind of say, okay, it's a bit of gore, a bit of zombie, whatever else. This literally is the stuff of nightmares. It's this thing where you look at it and you can't quite comprehend what it is you're looking at, but it's just terrifying.
Yeah, it is. It is weirdly spooky in its way, and also in the way they've never sort of referenced it again. Kind of gives it a weird sort of mythos. Yeah, it's such a strange image. The NTSC version is the sort of more iconic and widespread one that's been altered with, as you see if you scroll down further than that. The PC version of Japan abandoned the sort of skeletal looking thing in favour of the American box art, but a tweaked version of its own.
With BT's fingers.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I feel this and also the one above, they just don't. They're also, again, it's concept art for what Resident Evil 1.5 was. It's not it's not concept art for Resident Evil 2 at all. And that's interesting to me.
I like that it's not really kind of it's not from anything in particular. It's that in between, and thus it's kind of completely unique in that aspect. I mean, I'm more familiar, obviously, with the Japan and PAL cover. I used to find it freaky as a kid. Still find it freaky now. In fact, I think I find it more freaky now because I didn't realize that there's eyes. There are, like, eyes to that face. For some reason, I never noticed that as a kid, and it was more like skull-like. And now I can't unsee those. So every time I look over, it's really creepy.
Oh, I can see it now. All these years, and I never realised those circles.
It's weird, right? That said, I really love the NTSC edition of this. I don't know which one I prefer, though. Like, because we've got the PC version and we've got the PS1 version. The PS1 version shows a little more of the face, and you can see the sort of the teeth, like just gnashing by the door. But I really like the PC version because it doesn't have the teeth. You're seeing very little of the face, and the eyes are not. They're neutral, but you can tell that there's something wrong. Like they're human eyes, but something is desperately wrong with this individual, and you can see the fingers skulking around the door frame. I've always found that one of the creepiest ones. It's one of my favorite covers, just because it's I don't know. It's so subtle, but at the same time, it really kind of unsettles you when you look at it.
Yeah, the zombies being dead and neutral as opposed to aggressive, kind of bit more unnerving than just angry.
Yeah, that's totally fair. The only thing I don't really like about it, in particular the PS1 NTSC version, is that gigantic 2. I'm just not a fan of that logo. The 2 is offset. It's huge. I just always thought that was a really sort of off-putting logo. It seems like such a tiny little nitpick, but it's...
What about the massive V and the curved R and the font? No!
It's weird. It's just weird.
Is that the only time that font has shown up? Because it's there for the NTSC PS1 version, but not the PC.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. It's like a tweaked version of the font they've done where they've just sort of extended the V and then given the R this sort of tail. And it's very odd. Then, so further after that, the reason I put the Japanese PC version is just to show that they went through some different cover arts over the time. So the next two are the N64 and Dreamcast re-releases, whereas NTSC and Power Regions kept their cover art pretty much consistent. Japan always had something new, so the N64 version of Biohazard 2 had Leon and Claire just kind of slapped over a pre-rendered background over the streets, and similarly the Dreamcast has a sort of render of Leon walking away from the fire, which, it's a bit lazy.
A little too confident, isn't it? He looks way too cocky.
Yeah, considering where that situation is, and he's about to get mauled by 6 zombies.
Yeah,
walking at that kind of brisk pace, he's probably going to have some issues. Not really sure why they did that, but not exactly box arts that have gone down as lasting images in the Resident Evil history books. So following on, Biohazard 3. This one's an interesting one because there's sort of 3 variations. There's one variation per region of what is really kind of the same sort of thing. The imposing figure of Nemesis in Japan from sort of a low angle, a much more up close one for the NTSC with another very strange choice in logo, and then the PAL one which zooms a little bit out. Yeah, they're all similar but also strikingly different.
I think the Japanese one has spoiler-tastic. There's literally a picture of Brad's corpse on the front of
Yeah, not a fan of that.
which is possibly not the wisest choice. But the thing that bugs me the most is the American one's font. That aged so much.
It's very
looking at the
90s.
NTSC version. It's real 90s. And it's just a bit cringe-inducing, whereas at least like the PAL version has a little bit more of class to it, if that makes sense.
Look at that 3. Look at that 3.
Yeah.
That's not a number, that's like a tool. That's like a shearing tool.
Yeah. However, we have missed out the true gem here because, oh my god, I've never seen it until now. Listeners, if you have the opportunity to look at the Russian version, that's a thing.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that's a thing.
It's what amazing. Is this? It looks like, I mean, it's not bad. It looks like really good fan art, but it's very strange.
It's incredible.
He looks stubby.
Yeah,
and angry about it.
He looks like the kind of like Warhammer figure version of him, you know?
Is that actually Jill being like disemboweled on his...
I don't know. I think it's vague enough that it could be anybody.
It's a very awkward mutilation as well. It's kind of like pulling him into him, and it's like he's just gone for the most violent of hugs.
Yeah.
I prefer the PAL version myself because it's not too zoomed in like the NTSC, but also it's squarely on the Nemesis. Like you're staring him down right in the middle, and that's why I kind of like that.
My personal feelings on the Nemesis box art is it's kind of a whole thing. I'm not really a fan of the fact that Nemesis is on the box art. Obviously, the game is called Nemesis outside of Japan, so you can't really not have him on it. But I don't like the idea that he's there for you to stare at for as long as you like and just kind of like, you know, acclimatize yourself to a little bit. You know, I like if he wasn't there, the mystery of him jumping out and being like, what is that? What does that look like? Trying to figuring it out in your head. Whereas you can just sort of look at it on the box art and get sort of accustomed to what it is. If the game had been called Last Escape Everywhere, you probably could have avoided that. It's just a minor thing where I'm not really a fan of him being just kind of like, boom, here he is on the box art.
That's fair enough.
The Japanese version is literally the splash screen when you boot up the game, isn't it?
It is.
When you put your menus and stuff. Yeah.
It's not the only one that's done that as well, as we'll get to. And now, reading the file Researcher's Will from Resident Evil Outbreak, Geist, who you can follow on YouTube at youtube.com/wandering voice actor.
Oh, I can't believe this. 3 days have passed since a couple of subjects in the 125R would escape from B area, began a killing spree in the laboratory. I think at least 10 of my colleagues have been killed by them. However, I got to experience the horror firsthand as one of their giant sharp claws ripped my body. The bleeding from the wound just doesn't seem to stop. Why? Why did we create such terrible things? We had no right to play God. The only thing left for me to do now is to destroy the laboratory temperature controls. When the temperature drops down to about 0 degrees, they'll be frozen in their tracks. Hopefully, this is about the only thing I can do now. Damn my foolishness.
So here's an interesting one. This is the one I put up with the post to announce the podcast because I think it's really interesting because all regions are wildly different. Resident Evil Survivor, or in Japan, Biohazard Gun Survivor, which has in the Japanese release the silhouetted figure of the protagonists. The American version has, sort of concept sketches of the protagonist and the tyrant from the game. I guess that's meant to be. And the PAL version has gone minimalistic and just kind of put a gun and some bullets. And yeah, I always thought that was a really weird box art choice. Doesn't really say. I mean, this is the the kind of arcade shooter, so I could see why they do that, but it doesn't really tell you that on the box.
Every single one of these screams not final artwork to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I had to pick one, I'd say I preferred the American one, but none of them are particularly great.
There's like a silhouetted gas mask on the Japanese version, I've just noticed.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, there is. Very odd. I think that is... Oh, that's a cleaner. Or an
that's
Undertaker.
the actual enemies you encounter in it. The ones that look like Hunk, but are somehow monkeys. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hunter monkeys.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay.
Yeah. Just a weird smorgasbord of strangeness.
You see, if it had been called Gun Survivor Everywhere, I feel like the PAL version would have made a little bit more sense. But again, it would have to be like the G-Con 45 of the actual, modded up to look like a real gun or something.
Yeah,
the
maybe.
American one's just scowly man and scary face. So kind of.
Wasn't this around the time that I think it was Gun Survivor? The NTSC version wasn't actually compatible with the gun for the console at the time because there was,
I think that's right. Yeah,
there's some controversy. So I imagine that it might be that this was adopted in a hurry because they didn't want to show firearms on the cover.
That's very true, actually. Well remembered. Yeah.
I'm old. I remember these things.
No, it's all right. We appreciate the knowledge. So
yeah, I much like the PAL versions where they don't feature explicit pictures of zombies. I wonder if this is the reason for why.
Yeah, that's actually a very valid point that I hadn't even considered. Released in the same year was Code Veronica, and this is what I was saying about title screen art. The Japanese version has the title screen in a sort of like weird, dulled kind of way with Chris and Claire and the castle in the background. And then the NTSC and PAL version has, I don't know, just a different image. Chris and Claire renders some sort of... I'm not really sure what's going on behind them. Yeah, nothing too remarkable about these two, I don't think.
NTSC Chris looks very chill about the situation, whereas Japanese one looks like he's about to go punch someone for spilling his drink. Like, very, you dare. But,
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit more confidence and aggression in the Japanese version, whereas there's more worry on Claire's face. But other than that, they're fairly being brutally a bit meh.
Yeah. Which, again... Funny because they can't. When they did Code Veronica X in Japan, it's just a white case with a logo. That's it.
The emphasis on the characters in 4 out of the 5 covers for Code Veronica that we're looking at, it seems like a real time capsule of the period, like Dreamcast era, PS2 era, where it's about how well you can render characters now. And kind of showing sort of like how impressive that factor is. Look at these characters; they look really good. So it's just kind of interesting that they kind of take center stage on both the front of the covers and on the back of the covers as well. If you're looking at the Code Veronica X Japan cover, they've got the character renders there as well. Yeah,
that's very true. I mean, when you think about it, especially when you're looking at the NTSC and PAL regions, they'd never really done putting renders on the front before. So yeah, you're probably right. It was a sign of the times in its own way. So I just
noticed Wesker's on the NTSC Code Veronica X cover.
That was an addition to the title screen as well. Something that I absolutely despise. X is the re-release, so I guess spoilers matter less. But Wesker, who's meant to be dead by this point, is in your title screen and on your box art as well. So good job on that one. But it all pales in comparison to the PAL release of Code Veronica X, which is pretty terrible. The up-close render of Claire's face with identical zombie pose in each eye. Not really a fan of this one. But
look at those polygons. Look at how they're rendering that. Look at that texture quality.
Yeah, all 6 of them.
But let us now move on to the much better game in the series. Which you all knew I was going to say, because my God, this has got the best cover.
Yeah,
I actually like it, to be honest.
Gaiden,
it's good.
I mean, in all fairness to it, it does kind of give you an idea of what you're looking at. Something horrible happens on a boat. Lots of people die, probably. There's blood everywhere.
Resident Evil Revelations looked at this and thought, what if?
Well, not just a cover of the game.
The NTSC version, they got some kid to draw, but we'll ignore that one.
Well, yes.
That he coloured it in after having his dinner at a restaurant.
Isn't that 1.5 box art? Not to detract from the brilliantness of the NTSC version.
Yeah, that is definitely 1.5 like concept art, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I don't really understand what's going on with the sort of like quality of the Stars logo. I know that's not the best image, but it's never been a high quality like picture of the not Stars logo, sorry, Raccoon Police logo. Weird. It's just the NTSC one is really odd.
I like his little steampunk elbow pad. Don't know what that's about.
I have no idea. It looks like he's collecting arcade buttons on his elbow pad.
To be fair, Leon has never been one for following uniform guidelines. Not once in his entire career. So
yeah, this is true. Now, so moving on from something that's surprisingly good to the absolute worst of the bunch, Gun Survivor 2, Code Veronica. One at a time, I suppose. The Japanese one is a mess of like, almost kind of like it wants to be a Hollywood poster. It would actually sort of go with today's kind of over-the-top posters of trying to squeeze everything in. You got a Claire render and a Tyrant render, and then Steve in the middle, where his head isn't like logical in shape or size. It continues past the barrel of his gun in a way that doesn't make any sense.
Oh no, it's like the GoldenEye cover there.
That's exactly what I was thinking. It's like the GoldenEye cover, except it's not like a mind's eye kind of trick. If you visualize that gun is not there, he's looking straight at you, but his head goes off at an angle. Nonsense. Just nonsense.
I didn't even realize that was supposed to be a Tyrant on the front. I thought it was generally just some random dude.
Just some guy.
That is Vin Diesel.
Yes, Biohazard featuring Riddick.
It is quite confusing. I mean, I look at this and it doesn't even look like anybody on the cover is actually holding that golden gun at the front. That just looks like somebody else's hand just pointing up.
I found this.
I think for me that the issue with this is that I genuinely feel of all of the terrible, terrible characters that have appeared in Resident Evil, Steve is the absolute bottom of the pile.
Yeah.
Steve is literally, I think, the worst character in video games ever.
Wow.
And I'm quite happy to admit that. And a big gold gun, a misshapen head doesn't help me with that whatsoever.
Well, similarly, I also think that this is the worst game in the franchise because of just how stupid, needless, and nothing it is. For those of you who aren't aware of what it is a sort of arcade shooter retelling of Code Veronica, which turns out to be a dream. It's just stupid. There's a reason why it never came out in NTSC, and when it didn't, all the American fans wanted to know what they were missing, and would just be happy you never got it. Because you might have got a cover as bad as that, or the PAL version, which is the reverse of Code Veronica X, where you see like a really worried zombie with two pictures of Claire, like terrible like bitmaps in his eyes, and there's like motion blur going on at the bottom, like his jaw is trying to fall off in a hurry. It's terrible. It's awful.
She looks so higher def than the actual whole flipping rest of the image as well. Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, you're right. The consistency between the zombie's face and the Claire's, it just doesn't work at all.
It's got 4K displays for eyes.
Yeah, that. Someone was like fully aware they weren't getting paid for this. That's pretty much what this tells me.
I mean, the ethos of the cover I don't mind so much, like a close-up of a gross zombie. But as you say, he doesn't look exactly imposing. He looks concerned. And that's never a good look for a zombie on your cover. You're supposed to look intimidating.
Yeah.
So it's meant to be obviously a reverse of the Code Veronica X cover, right?
Yeah.
But it's not even the same zombie.
No. Yeah, because they couldn't make that image work, I guess. I don't know.
Look, Claire has stared down a lot of zombies. she's just that.
So yeah, moving quickly on from that to the GameCube now with the remake of Biohazard. I quite like the Japanese version. It's kind of like a throwback to the DualShock front hall cover that we were talking about, but now remakes version of it. The NTSC version has the classic Jill struggling with zombie image, which seems like an awfully specific event to put on your front cover. I guess it works. And then the PAL version, which started kind of a trend of the next few games, particularly on the GameCube, of being
Rust.
Yeah, simple, just simple as, yeah. I mean, you couldn't get more simple. Is his kind of a background of nothing and the name, and that's it.
I think they're all winners myself because I think they're all kind of approaching it a different way and
Yeah.
achieving that effect. I mean, I think like the Biohazard Japanese cover is kind of it's showing off just how different it looks after only a matter of years. Which, if you're familiar with the game, that's automatically going to draw you in.
Yeah, definitely.
NTSC, like there's obviously the threat like present right there in the foreground, but it's not like an overwhelming threat. So it makes you feel really that this game is going to be tough, even if it's just you one-on-one versus a zombie in a hallway. It's going to be tough. And obviously, I'm most familiar with the PAL version. It's a strange cover because, as I say, I was familiar with the original cover as a kid, and then I see this, and it's just text, and it kind of unsettles you because, there aren't many games that just have text, and that's it, just text on the background. So you think that what's going to be in this game is too gory to put on the cover or something like that. So I was kind of interested in the aspect that they went with that it's the peak of subtlety.
It's mysterious, and if nothing else, I wonder if it was partly everybody knows what Resident Evil is. When we make this game again for the GameCube and we just put that on the box, people are automatically going to go, towards this and know the history of this, and this is the reinvention. Yeah, there's something there where it was like we can do nothing, and the legacy and the hype for this sort of remake could carry it. I guess it's one way to look at it.
How about the Wii cover?
So yeah,
No.
the remake, if you want, not a remake really, is it? It's the archives.
Scratch that.
Yeah, sorry, misspoke. The archives versions, as they call them, they're all the same in the other regions, but the Japanese ones for both this and Zero got new covers of, again, like similarly to Code Veronica. Here are the renders. Very odd.
Yeah, but Jill's like a totally different lighting scheme to how Chris is as well, and he's got a glow to him. She hasn't, and I don't like it. It hurts my eyes.
Yeah,
In a very childish way.
I'm not really a fan of the just sort of like slapped together stuff. Like, I mean, you put it that way, of course it's going to sound bad, but they're just grabbing things and being like, yeah, there's Jill as Chris Mansion done. Like, it's almost kind of like some of the box art that isn't on here is stuff like the Origins pack. I didn't put anything where it's like a collection. Even the Revelations one, where I really like, where they sort of crossed the two images over together, I didn't put them on here because I just wanted to focus on the games, the actual original releases of the games and stuff. But it does kind of remind me of those where they just like, here's an image from one game and another game. It's like, here's the character and another character. Done.
Yeah, it was very by the numbers, yeah.
Yeah.
These renders...
Go ahead. We'll do that. I feel like the ones where the Resident Evil covers, in fact, most games covers where they do that, just feel like they are the absolute dialed-in worst covers.
Yeah, they are.
Like if I look at the Japanese version of Remake, for example, that's a really classy cover. Like that's very timeless. You can look at that game whenever you want, that box, and go, that successfully encapsulates the game. It's what you want it to be. And also, 20 years from now, you'll look at that and recognize it and go, okay, iconic image, hasn't really aged, looks cool. Whereas, you look at the other stuff like Code Veronica, for example, and you kind of cringe at the sort of what they were showing at the time.
Yeah, totally.
That's the worst part. The Wii version is literally the old Japanese one. They just put renders in front of it to like obscure the whole mansion shot and brine it out. It's no.
Zero is the return of let's make an image and then kind of zoom in on it. So the Japanese version has Billy and Rebecca on, I guess that's somewhere on the train. And then the NTSC version has a similar one. It's where it seems even less like they're in the surroundings that they're put in. And again, the PAL version continues the mysterious, if you like, covers of just kind of having a very simple background and the logo.
And a complete contrast in having a white background as well. So it's quite a bright image, which for the PAL region hadn't been the case up until this point. There's a lot of dark colors, sort of like dark images, and now you've got just a white background with the name.
That might well have been a good marketing decision, though, at the time. If all of the other games had very dark, very gloomy coloured images, that really stands out.
Absolutely.
It does
You got
kind of.
microbes.
It makes me think it's like the mirror, the one side of the coin and the other side of the coin. Here you've got the first game, and here's the game that's 24 hours before it. So why not flip it? So I agree that it's effective in one way there. I'm not really a fan of the other box arts, particularly, to be honest.
I give a heads up to the Zero's cover for the Wii release in Japan. Like the render of it, there's some suggestion of a threat just behind the camera, whereas some of the other renders of the main characters, they're just sort of like in an action-ready pose, but they're not necessarily facing anything. So I kind of like that.
Yeah, it definitely improves upon it by making it seem like something's actually happening. The other ones kind of again feel like they've just got background, got character art, and just combined them. Whereas this is actually something happening. So this is a big improvement over remakes cover art for sure. So flipping back to the PlayStation, this one going back to Gun Survivor, in particular Gun Survivor 4. Because the third one was a Dino Crisis game, or Dead Aim elsewhere. This one's an interesting one because the Japanese box art has loads of like creatures and stuff going on in the background. You've got the hunter there, and I guess that's a tyrant at the back. The American version is much more muted. It's basically just the two main characters. And then PAL goes back to, hey, let's use the iconic eye image and just stick a crosshair over it, and I don't know, a guy with a sniper rifle or something going on there, the laser sight. Dead Aim has consistently weird cover art, basically.
I really like the Japanese version, though. It's kind of got this classy 80s style to it.
Yeah, it does. It does look like an 80s movie poster, doesn't it?
The Japanese cover is amazing.
Yeah, the back-to-back action pose.
It's I believe it's by Toshiaki Mori, who's known as Shinkiro. He does a lot of different artworks, mainly for things like Metal Slug, and Marvel vs. Capcom and stuff like that. Okay. He's a fantastic artist, and the mad thing is that his efforts have been put for Gun Survivor 4. And this cover didn't even appear in Europe. So, I saw this obviously years later. I thought it was amazing. And then I was immediately annoyed that we didn't get it because it's such a good artwork for a game which I don't know if it necessarily deserves it. I really like this because it feels like a throwback to action movies of the 80s and such.
It almost, in a way, has that sort of B-movie feel. Like the original game had its B-movie feel. It's a bit tongue-in-cheek sort of in its own way. But in terms of the actual quality of the art, it is really rather good.
Yeah, and look at that subtitle, Heroes Never Die. Like, I just love... I love the audaciousness of this whole cover.
I don't really know what that has to do with the game, personally, but sure, it fits with the image, at least.
It's a total flip of what Resident Evil's supposed to be about. It's supposed to be scary and all of this, and this is just like, no, you're awesome. You're just going to blow everybody away.
So, continuing with the PlayStation 2 is the Outbreak games. Outbreak 1 is an interesting one, and the American art has the sort of firing gun with the weird reflection of a zombie. I'm not really sure what's going on there. And the Japanese and PAL have similar box art, and it's the gathering like horde of hands, which is kind of a nonsensical image, like in terms of that's not physically, unless someone's like taped a bunch of arms together. There's no way there's a bunch of zombies standing that close. But
it is in fact Legion from Symphony of the Night.
Yes, exactly. But I quite like that image. It sort of tells you a bit about what the game is. It gives you that survival sort of feeling from it. And also a note, I suppose, is the American copy uses the movie font.
Yes.
Any thoughts on Outbreak covers for the first game, at least?
I like the PAL one. I know we've said that it's a little bit impossible how they actually pose, but it's like a massive threat. That they're it's trying to imply you're going to be outnumbered. You're going to need backup. And it's very understated as opposed to everything's on fire and there are zombie reflecting guns in the American version.
It's not.
I kind of like it.
It's not that the American version doesn't reflect the name Outbreak, because I would say it does. There's a horde in the background there, and panic. But in terms of the gameplay, I guess the other ones do. You imply that you should get some friends, kind of. You're going to need them, sort of thing.
I really like the way they've given. I mean, obviously, I agree with you, Si. I like the way that the images work on Outbreaks. The first game, anyway. I like the sort of. But I love the attention to detail they've got with like the wedding ring, for example. Watch that sort of stuff. It really makes these zombies actually feel quite personal. Like this is just a person who has become a zombie. True. You don't see that on any of the other stuff. It's kind of focuses much more on kind of, oh, this is a ghoul. This is a traditional horror zombie that wants to eat you. These things actually feel like they are victims, and that's quite interesting.
That's a very good point.
That's very true. Yeah, I mean, it does imply the, if you're not careful, this could be you kind of element.
Especially if you look at like the PAL version where you've kind of got the sort of sleepy town underneath as well. Sort of underscores that as well. It's quite fun.
Yeah, I like the Outbreak art.
It's a really nice kind of simplistic, stylistic choice to kind of embody the idea of a zombie horde. Just these sort of limbs coming towards you, all these hands, and it looks really imposing. And I think as well, contrasted on the white background, it stands out obviously much better. So I think the PAL one wins. The NTSC one's all right. I think like actually going for that kind of that dark red and black kind of mood it works well for it, but that reflection in the gun just doesn't seem to make sense unless the zombie is firing the gun. I don't see how it makes sense.
It's Bub from Day of the Dead. So File 2, what I do like about File 2 is in every single iteration, it's the logo is consistent to the previous one. So the Japanese box art had the blue Biohazard logo on File 1, as does File 2. And the American version uses the movie font again. And the PAL version continues with the sort of red impact. So I quite like that. No matter what region you're in, they do link up in that way. But also of note, this might be the first game in the franchise where the box art is all essentially the same image, just with different colours or that kind of thing. It's very slight alterations.
It almost feels like you're buying Pokemon Blue, Pokemon Red, or you're buying the limited edition version.
Yeah, it does look like that. It does, yeah.
I think it's fun. Weirdly, because I wouldn't normally like this stuff. The PlayStation 2 version, the PAL version they're all PlayStation 2. The PAL version looks so much better than the others, and that's because they've taken a much more stylistic kind of approach. With kind of fading out whoever the survivor is who's not being Ian to the back. Although it's interesting they removed the firearm from it as well. In the other two, it's like the survivor is kind of going, here, take the gun because I'm obviously so screwed you wouldn't believe. Whereas in this one, it's more like a hopeless grab their wrist, but they are not coming home.
He's just after the watch.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, no, I didn't even notice the gun was missing, actually. That's, fair play. Anybody else got any points before we wrap up? Because we have gone quite long. So what I will say is we definitely do a part 2, I think.
No, it's good across the board. They're obviously kind of like experiment with the colors, but yeah, at this point, the white contrasting background seems to work quite well in the PAL region. Kind of complements the kind of
the
graphics
dark imagery.
Yeah, especially because they're quite simplistic. They're kind of just focused on one aspect. So yeah, I would say that the PAL one stands out again.
Capcom.
So this week's Bitesize Discussion comes to us via Sharky on the Discord, so shout out to him. This is something that we touched on a little bit before, but this time I want to get some concrete answers from people. And the question is, what do you want next from the Resident Evil series? He said this could be the remake of the third game, RE8, further board games, Sherwin. I don't know if you want to disclose any info. Or Revelations 3. In fact, Sherwin, why don't you start?
Truthfully, I believe they've made a really good... I believe that Capcom made a really good decision or a really good game with the Rari 2 remake. I think they've treated it with the reverence it needs to have. And truthfully, as an RE fan, I feel right now I'm fairly sated. I don't know necessarily what I'd want next, because like with anything, there's kind of a point where you get to where you have, not much of a really, really good thing, just about the right level, which kind of keeps you wanting more, but you don't get there. And then you have diabolically too much of a good thing that actually then becomes a bad thing. And I fear that sometimes the Resident Evil series has wandered into those territories. So I'm just very cautious of that. As a Resident Evil gamer at the moment, I'm fairly content. It's not to say I don't want new stuff, but it has to be in the right time and place.
Yeah, of course. And to your point, what you were saying about it being a time where it seemed like there wasn't a whole lot of good stuff happening. Yeah, in the last bunch of years, we've definitely seen lots and lots of improvement. 7 did wonderful things in its own way. Remake 2 has done wonderful things in a completely different direction. So, yeah, it is starting to feel like anything could happen and that anything could be good. My answer remains kind of unchanged from last time we talked about this. I'd preferably see 8 before we see Remake 3. Just to mix it up, personally. I don't want to feel at any point like we'd be stagnating, which I don't really think there's a danger of if we do get Remake 3 next. But yeah, I would like the differences to sort of balance. It'd be more interesting at the very least, I suppose. Obviously, it depends on how far into development Resident Evil 8 is. It could be a long way off yet, but I think Remake 3 is not only happening, I would imagine that the work has already begun, or at least it's going to have less work to do on it, because it's going to be at least similar, and it's going to have similar areas to Remake 2. So I wouldn't be surprised if that comes sooner rather than later in a way, but personally I'd take 8 first. Steve, where do you sit on this?
So we have a choice between Revelations 3, Resident Evil 8, or a remake. Is that right? Just double checking.
Yeah.
Of those 3, I'd go for Resident Evil 8. Just the fact that I want to see where the new arc goes. I want, as much as I like remakes and retreading old ground, I want to see new things. It's not that I don't enjoy it. Obviously, the old ones are all fantastic, and I'm still hype as hell for Resident Evil 2. But I kind of feel like we should be exploring newer things now.
Mm.
We've got first person down to a degree. We've got third person now going to be going into a sort of newer direction, kind of like what Revelations 1 wants to be, but better.
Yeah.
So if to pick either of those and go with it and explore the new lore, maybe less of the original cast and focus more on like establishing a credible actual like world again, because it feels like every other Resident Evil game there's just, here's this new villain, they're going to be here for 5 seconds and they're dead.
Yeah.
And it's ever since Resi 5, we've never had a stable, like, all right, let's go take down this person or whatnot. And I kind of want to see them try and establish that. So I have to go with Resi 8 personally.
And Jordan.
Okay, well, it seems like you're all in agreement for going with Resident Evil 8, more or less. So I'm gonna be the curveball. I'm gonna throw in a curveball here just to add something a little bit different to the mix. And I'm gonna bring up a point that I think I mentioned in the first podcast. I think it should be Remake 3, but first person. and go with a completely different interpretation. That is a patented Cerebok 64 hot take. You can get at me at Twitter and tell me how I'm wrong about that. But no, like I mentioned it just as an idea, and just to throw in as a curveball. Maybe they go that way. Maybe they decide to again take Remake into a different sort of means of playing Resident Evil. Instead of just going to a fixed camera angle, they went to over the shoulder. So maybe in Remake 3, they go for first person. This will not happen, by the way. I just thought I'd throw it in.
Well, the question is, what do you want, not what do you expect? So you're safe there. But yeah, people can, and of course, come and find you on Twitter and flame you for it. So nothing else remains for me but to thank our contributors to the show. If you'd like to be part of First Aid Spray, then please look into auditioning for our file readings. One way to get in touch with us is via email, which is faspraypod@gmail.com. But of course, the best course of action is to join our Discord server, where you can also ask questions for the Bitesize Discussion, discuss Resident Evil with us and other fans, and listen to the podcast live as it's recorded. The link to the server is in the description of this podcast, but it's also on our social media profiles. You can follow us on Twitter, which is at FASprayPod, on Instagram, which is FASprayPod, and on Facebook, which is facebook.com/FASprayPod. You can find the podcast on Stitcher, Spotify, and iTunes. And if you enjoyed the show, please do leave us a review if you can. It helps spread the word. Our next episode, of course, will be going back towards Remake 2. We're expecting to record perhaps in the week after release, maybe a little bit after that, depending on things, but we'll be doing a full review. We have plenty of plans beyond that, so do stick with us. We've got lots of cool stuff coming up. Thank you to the panel. You can follow us all individually on Twitter. I'm at Psyniac_123. Steve is at FireButtonGames. Jordan is at SerialBox64, and Sherwin is at Sherwin's Agenda. And finally, thank you for listening, and have a good week. Yeah, that's became like very evident very quickly that this was going to be a two-part.
Yeah, and I'll bring up the fact that when I messaged you about this, I think I actually brought it up as part of a bite-sized discussion.
Oh man!
I was like, yeah, let's just have a little bit of fun. Why don't we talk about box arts? And then here we go.
Now it's at least 2 episodes. Awesome.